my behalf as well. And thank you for taking the time, and thank you for exercising as much as walking from the next room here. I was actually thinking for myself that, I mean, most of the people sitting there, they would be comfortably just stay sitting there because there is a street there as well. So it's nice to see that at least some of you felt like stretching a little bit before. So what we're actually going to do, what I'm going to do today is start the stream that is called Cloud Ceiling. And apart from the title that it says there, basically I have two other roles that are maybe more connecting me to here. One is that I've been working for the last year. I've been accountable for the cloud strategy for Capgemini. I mean the infrastructure services for Capgemini, the cloud strategy and the cloud offerings. I'm going to say a few words about it at the end of the presentation. And then the other role is that I'm as a Capgemini representative in the board of the ODCA. So that is basically why I'm here. So just briefly to introduce what's going to happen in this room. I suppose it's all going to happen in this room. So basically we have the stream goes through, now we have the Capgemini keynote of course, and then we are going to have two very interesting stories. One from BMW, what they've done in the cloud, what they have experienced in the cloud and what they're actually working with right now, kind of an insight session from them. And then the other session is kind of a proof of concept, again, jointly with National Australia, Prang, Terramap and the Trapezoid. So that's probably going to be very, very interesting. And then we end the day with two panel sessions. One is about the enterprise cloud, and then the other one is related to the big data, both the kind of main topics for these sessions as well. Okay, then about cloud best practices, I would say things to remember rather. I've been more or less telling the same story for the last year or 2 years, wherever I've been. Little bit changes, but I think the best practices and things to remember are still the same. The world hasn't really changed so much. Maybe the first thing that I want to say is not a little, maybe even controversial to why we are here. The cloud is not going to change everything. When you go around here, you go to see all the presentations, so you see here what people are talking about. You know all the things and actions that are taking place in your company. You might think that, okay, the cloud is coming, it's going to take over everything, and nothing else is left, anymore. And it's not the way, and that's really important also to remember. The cloud is not going to change your business. You still have to have your business ideas. The cloud is going to help you in your business, but it's not going to change your business. Cloud home, it's not going to change your marriage. If you get along well with your spouse, fine, but Skype is not going to help much, and so on. So you really have to understand that the cloud is not everything. Why do we think that the cloud is everything? This is a Capgemini way of presenting it, but basically many companies use roughly the same. What the cloud is all about. What are we looking for, or what are we thinking about when we think about cloud? First of all, what does the cloud enable? It should enable the client's new business models, increased speed to market, business process transformation, investment optimization, all those things we all know about them. It enables them, but it doesn't make them. Remember that one as well. So it's good to understand. It is an enabler, but not a doer. And then we have the few things that it really does deliver. That is the financial transformation. Mostly we talk about the CapEx, OpEx conversion, of course. And then also, and that, as we heard also before, it's still one of the really big issues. What do you do with your cash, and where do you keep your cash? And then, of course, the agility, IT agility, the kind of flexibility, what you can do when you can scale up, you can scale down depending on your needs. So that is actually what it does deliver. But it also requires quite a few things, and that also makes it complicated. To be able if you want to say that you are using cloud, the cloud basically, at the bottom line, it has to be offered as a service, internally, externally, whatever, but it is as a service. And it is also scalable, so it has to be scalable and elastic. Rather more, we've done a lot of kind of pay-per-use already for 10 years or 15 years. But typically we do a lot of things more like per capacity reservation, not by the actual usage of the capacity. So when you really think about cloud, you should get closer and closer so that you pay or your costs are aligned with the capacity that you are really using. Then the accessibility, of course, through networks, that's quite clear. Pay-per-use, and then basically, to me, a cloud should be somehow shared or multi-tenant. We can then say that, okay, it's a private cloud, everything is dedicated. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but still, to me, the real cloud is somehow shared and more multi-tenant. It can be so that, for example, if it's a government cloud, there are several offices or government bureaus that are using the same cloud or whatever inside the company, but some kind of a sharing of multi-tenancy, not only for the network going to be there. So if you think about all this, it sounds extremely complicated, and you feel that it's going to change everything easily. It's going to change your business, it's going to change the way you work. And then the one important layer that actually is even more important when going to cloud is the service integration, aggregation, orchestration. That we don't really think enough about. Okay? Then you think that everything is going to change. I wouldn't say so. I would really try to think that cloud is evolutionary in the implementation, but only in the usage it's revolutionary. When you think about the cloud stack, I'm not a technical guy, but still, to me, what really makes a difference in cloud is the actual provisioning, where you can easily scale up and down and so on. Everything below that, including the hypervisors, whatever stuff you have, it's basically normal IT, it's capacity on demand, whatever. There is a lot of technology has been improving on the hypervisors, on the actual technology, the speed and so on, as we all know, but it's nothing to do with cloud to me. It really is the technology stack. But how do you then use? That is where the revolution is. But anyway, when you think about cloud, normal, what you are doing in IT projects, I would recommend to use the same kind of best practices that you already have. What skills you already have, better use those as well, and so on, and don't throw everything out just because something is new, which is basically can be very thin layer. So just try to keep the common sense and don't get carried away too far away from the reality. What is the other thing? What are the new topics or new aspects carefully planned? Yeah, it's kind of obvious to say. Why? Because the cloud, this is where we also the ODCA fits into the picture well. That is actually where we all have difficulties in how do we fill the gap here. Everybody knows this, you have a traditional data center, then everything already today is more or less virtualized. Fine. And then we have a public cloud. The guys with the public cloud services, but there is a very, very big gap between those two. So how do we bridge that gap? Basically, there is one thing that vendors like us or somebody else is that we can sell you a private cloud. Or you can buy a private cloud, you install it in your data center or whatever data room, whatever how fancy facilities you happen to have, and then you can use it in a way like a cloud. But basically it is, the only big difference is that from the virtualized data center, your provisioning becomes hopefully much more automated and so on, and the scalability thus comes much better. But it's not really revolutionary. Typically, when it's a private cloud, you have to buy it, it's still capital expense as well. Then there are different kind of external private clouds, like what we are offering and all the service providers are offering. Basically, it just means that then we take, as a service provider, the capital expense, we have it hosted in our data centers, and then it can be basically either it can be dedicated for you, or then it can be a multi-tenant so that we are sharing it with several clients. The common foundation, which is very important for all those 4 boxes basically, is that there is a clear strategy and business case that I recommend that you have. You have to know why you do it, and there has to be a business case for it as well. It's kind of an easy to go with the cloud and say that because it's going to save so much money. It may well do so. But you have to have a clear business case that you can also measure, and then you can track record. Readiness assessment, how ready you are, how ready the part of business you need that cloud for. How ready is that for going to that kind of a service? They typically may be using a legacy service. Then there is a lot of features somewhere, and if you then start discussing with them and they come to tell you that I want all the exactly the same features that I have in my legacy application, I want all those same to be sitting in that cloud application that I'm going to use, it most likely is not going to be a success. The architecture, design, services, implementation, transition, security, of course, I'll talk a few words about networking and security, and then the service management. how do you integrate, how do you aggregate between the different towers, how do you really manage the whole thing. They are the common foundation there. Now, why Capgemini is in the ODCA? We've been working for the last 2 or 3 years very heavily with all cloud-related things. I'll show you a few things later also on the different cloud offerings, just the roadmap that we are building. But we also, all the service providers, just like all the cloud users, where we struggle is that there is no common language. For example, we build our offerings, then we go and sell it, and then we build it as a standardized offering. We go to the market, and then the clients start, especially if you think about infrastructure as a service. It's easier if you go to platform or application, but if you think about infrastructure as a service, I go and say to my client that here is my infrastructure as a service, here is the SLA, here is your, and the first question is that, okay, where is the data? How long distance is between your data centers? How do you connect, and so on. So you get down to the technical details, the first thing, and you don't have a common language. And that's also, I think, the security, all that is kind of a big thing for many people. So what does the ODCA basically do to help it? First of all, there's 3 kind of main streams or usage models that the ODCA is working with. It is about the kind of compute, the IaaS, compute as a service, the network part, the kind of a storage part, all that. So there's usage models that we are building for those. Then there is the actual commercial framework that relates to what I said earlier about not having a common terminology, so that we can really, you can make a proposal to service provider, and service provider can answer to the proposal, so that you understand each other as well. And then also the service orchestration management integration, what does it really mean? So they are the kind of a master, and then there is more focused on basically 4 areas, on the secure, automation, the common management, and then the transparency as well. So, and all those, that's the main reason, as I said, for us to be there, is that when we bridge the gap, when we kind of bridge the gap between the public cloud and the data centers, all those usage models are actually needed to make an enterprise-class cloud solution at scale. That was added by the ODCA, so I don't really know, but it sounds very good. Okay. What does the planning really mean? As I said already earlier, service definition, quality of service. Quality of service, for example, is very important again. You don't, there is a big difference of, many people think that with the cloud you get the advantages, cost advantages, everything of the public cloud. Of the private, you get the technology or the service of the private cloud with the price of a public cloud. It's not that simple. There is always a certain cost for each different part. So what is the quality of service? What is the evolution? You have to think about your service catalog as well. How does it evolve? How does it fit into your and the actual life cycle, which is always part of the service catalog. And then the use cases, as I said, really define it. Think about it. What are the use cases? What are you going to use your cloud for? And then remember that it is a totally new business model. For us as a service provider, it's a totally new business model, and then for cloud clients, it's also a totally new procurement model in a way. All the organizations don't really know how to measure it or how to manage it. I can think about from service provider point of view that traditionally when we do deals, we make long deals, people are using the capacity, we know that there is a certain kind of a commitment, we can work together to improve, but cloud, basically there is no lock-in. You can come and you can go, so how does it really work? And the same basically also for the cloud users or the ones who are procuring cloud, how do I measure it? What is the business case really? What does it really look like? Thinking about that, you still need to move your workloads, do the transition and so on. So think about that one as well. And then the products and targets, it's actually not only for service providers, but it's also for companies who plan to use cloud for your internals. So you need to understand what is the department, what is the need of your internal part of the business who's going to use that cloud service. So you have to define what the product is going to really look like, what they need, and then define it and go from there. Third, build to the lowest common denominator. what does it really mean? It relates to the kind of complication of the cloud that I already mentioned earlier. So basically, let's think a few things. There is two big influences on whatever we do with cloud. There is a guy, the kind of a technology executive, and then there is a business exec. And they may have, or they will have a little bit different views. So if you think about from business point of view, and what we have to remember is that there are things, of course, that are happening in the world that we can't really influence. There may be business expansion that is defined. There is a certain cost reduction mandate that the business exec has got from the top, and then there is your infrastructure is just failing right now, so it really is a problem for your business point of view. And then also the compliance, it may be a compliance issue depending on the sector you are working with. A lot of things that you can't really influence, they just come to you. And then the business execs, they have different financial strategy and personal goals and targets as well. The stock market can be one, the market share there, and then also meeting the actual targets. All those influence of the way your business exec sees the cloud as well. All those influence, all those you have to understand when you are building the business case. And then if you go to the technology executive, he or she has probably a little bit different point of view. There are things or events that occur regardless of what we do. You may have poor service level, there may be a failed audit and so on, so there are many things that you can't really influence directly from the department or from the place where you are working with. And then again, there are financial, strategic and personal kind of goals or targets that the tech exec feels. So how do you then fit for the needs of your CEO, CFOs, and then the CTOs, CIOs? We could also discuss a lot, but it's not the topic, that how the role of the CIO is changing, because that is probably one of the roles that will, with the cloud, it will have a big change. It really becomes more like instead of a chief infrastructure or officer, information officer, more like a service orchestrator or orchestration officer. That's the way where it's going. So letting go, there is less and less server huggers anymore, or room for those. So it's going to change a lot. But still, and in a way the roles are going to merge as well, but there is always going to be a business point of view, and then there is always going to be a technology point of view. And that's what we need to understand. So then what does building on the lowest common denominator means? Is really keeping it short and simple. So that you try to simplify things as much as you can. If you try to start your cloud journey just like you are starting any other IT-related journey, so that you try to solve all the problems that you know, it's not going to succeed. So please try to simplify this as much as you can, and then when you really manage what you build, then you can grow, you can make it more complex, you can make it more overwhelming in a way, and then don't try to solve too many problems, as I already said. So try to start it simple. It's the same thing as everything in life. If you try to make too many changes or too many big things at the same time, it's actually a typical problem of any given IT problem, any given IT transition, any given software development project, is that how do you manage the scope? You set the scope in the beginning. Typically it can be very easy to define it clearly, but then when you start going, you start letting go. You give away, you have your clients who tell you that, oh, but I would like to see this and this as well. Okay, you think it's a small change, you let go, and so on and so forth it goes. So basically it's exactly the same methodology that you should apply here as with any kind of an infrastructure, or actually any project. It goes if you are building a house as well. Okay, then there was a discussion about the security already before as well, and there will be discussions about network and security also later today. Of course, network and security are, in a way, they are connected, because basically, if you don't have network, then your environment is rather secure. Whether it's usable, then it's a kind of a continuum where you have to place yourself. That's one way of drawing what cloud could be. You can draw it in many ways, but actually that is not so important. But you do have clients. You do have clients who need to have access, the end user access to the services. There is some kind of a, typically, whatever access you have to the data center, whether it's your own data center or your service provider's data center, the access is the network, the physical network, all that is typically somehow shared. Then you have what you could call the whole cloud environment. You have the self-service portal, the cloud management, virtualization, hardware, and so on and so forth. And then you may have some enterprise management system beneath it. But what does the network really, what are the things that you go through? You think that your cloud, it has to seamlessly integrate with your systems. It's especially, of course, a big thing when you are buying a cloud service from somebody else, from a service provider. How does it work? What does seamlessly integrate? What does it really mean? It's actually quite difficult to define. There is a certain, as I already said, multi-tenancy. There have to be always in place in any kind of a network access. You hardly build a network link, whatever it is, just for one purpose. So there is always some kind of a multi-tenancy, multi-tenant or multi-purpose network that you need to use. You have a lot of resource pools, then you have VLANs. Actually, you have a lot of different, there is a lot of, as you know, there is a lot of different network components, starting from the storage area network, going towards through all the VLANs and so on, and then you have your wide area access. You go probably through a public cloud, be it MPLS, whatever it is. So there is a lot of things that you have to think about. There is a few things that I think you should remember when you very high level things that you have to remember when you start building your network or thinking about the network. First is that you need, as I said, you need the front end access for your end users. On the other hand, which you often forget, you need the back end access for those people or those companies or whoever it is who is managing your cloud platform. They may or may not be physically the same link or part of the same link, but basically you need two different kind of accesses. And then when you think about how traditionally the networks are built and the accesses are built, we do everything we can to totally separate those in the traditional world. So we have the end users coming in through a pipe, and then we have the back end coming in through a different pipe. So it can be very difficult actually. What we've noticed many times is that when you try to build cloud and try to utilize as much as you can of the existing networks, of the existing connections, even with our existing clients, you face those problems. How do you manage? And then it becomes even more difficult especially if you don't plan it well in advance. When you start kind of, when your cloud or when your services are spanning across different data centers or spanning across even different regions or different countries or even different continents. How do you really manage it? So again, it's the same thing that I think really plan in advance. Think about what you already have and then start your plans from what you already have. Okay, then if you have thought about the cloud, you've already thought about the network, everything seems to be clear, then how do you plan to operate your cloud? That is a framework, again, that Capgemini is using, but basically anybody, it's the same thinking all over the place. You have your customers, and then these are typically the big areas that any given company, no matter if you build your cloud yourself, no matter if you buy it from a service provider, or if you go to the public cloud, Amazon, and so on, you have to think there is always a certain retained IT that will stay with you. How do you connect? How do you exchange information with your retained IT? How does it work with the people that you retain in your company? And then the other big thing is what already been mentioned quite a few times is service integration, service management, service orchestration. How does it work? Because what I've said many times when I've been talking about outsourcing services is that you can outsource, for example, services. You can outsource services externally, or you can outsource them basically to your IT department, whatever, but you can never outsource the final responsibility or accountability of the services if you are the kind of a business owner in a way. you can't really, yeah, you can send a claim and you can send different kind of an escalations if it doesn't work. But always the business works, it's always your responsibility. So you can't, in a way, outsource the responsibility. That's why the service integration management, how do you build it? There have to be some kind of a connect point, clear contact point, responsibility, accountability in your organization. And then basically, if you want, you can buy that as a service as well. But it still means that you have to have somebody who's fully accountable inside. So there is a single contact point as well. And then basically everything below that is kind of outside the box, because they can either be in-house or then they can be outsourced. So you have a certain processes, tools. If you are outsourcing a lot of your business, then typically your processes and tools should come from your outsourcing partner. If you try to have your own processes and tools and then just have an outsourcing partner who kind of uses those, it may work well, but I mean there are difficulties as well usually. And integrated services, especially in the cloud, because the cloud is all about industrialization, efficiency, standardization, and so on and so forth. Integrated service desk, you need some kind of service desk that really knows what's going on, where everybody can actually contact and that actually can manage whatever is there beyond. And then you have your service providers, and then basically you can have different assets. You can have your services in different kind of environments. So basically you can have different kind, and then the integration and orchestration again becomes the most critical part there. So how do you operate your cloud? I think team building and resourcing is a key. Everything we do in IT, for example, I mean, well, not everything. I know that the service can break down and your routers and whatever, they can break down as well, but basically it is all about people. Most of the failures, no matter what the failures are, in IT, they are because people have made mistakes. They are because of the processes, they are because of lack of competence and so on. So my recommendation is that when you have the cloud, you would try to have an integrated team that actually inside the team have all the skills that you need for managing the cloud, to the extent before that you want to do in-house, because then it's much more easier. And the communication is much more easier and so on. Okay, cloud processes, as I said, they really more relate to that provisioning layer. How do you allow, first of all, a kind of a self-usage? It depends on the application. It depends what it's for. So you may allow a lot for the end users, or then you may keep it, for example, inside your IT department or whoever manages your cloud. So there is really the provisioning and scaling up and down. Those functionalities are the things that you have to think about as an addition to any traditional service management process. Okay, life cycle creation, installation, operation, termination. Basically what I've been also talking about is that you really think about the whole thing. If you think about cloud, we discussed it also actually yesterday when we had there was a technical coordination committee meeting, is that the kind of operations or the orchestrations, what do you need? You need a kind of you need an asset management in place. You need a certain CMDB kind of a thing in place, because how can you provision your capabilities if you don't have them managed somewhere somehow? So that's also very important to know exactly what happens, because easily if you forget those, especially in a cloud environment, then you lose control quite fast. So these are the 5 things that I want to leave with you to think about and to consider whenever you think about cloud or cloud-related things. And remember all the time that cloud doesn't change everything. I think that's really good to remember. It is sometimes there is so much hype around the cloud, and that you easily get kind of diluted. I'm going to end with a few words about Capgemini. I'm not going to go through that, but that is our cloud development portfolio. What we are working with, basically the first ones are what we are already selling, which are on the market, and then the next 3-4 ones are. So this is more not to show. This is more to show you how complicated it also is from service provider point of view. What kind of an offerings you really want to build for the cloud. So infrastructure as a service, as I said, the kind of first release that we have now up and running. As I said, we are facing a lot of difficulties, for example, with the security and network. Partly because we started by really defining 2 years ago what the cloud, we focused on the hypervisors, we focused on how it's going to work, how do you do provisioning, and we just install it, and then it's up and running. It's not that easy, but especially when you go and discuss with your client. It is about the security networks and so on. So that's why we are now, the next release is going to be published, I think, by the end of the month. Storage as a service, messaging as a service, actually we have two offerings, one with Zimbra, one with Exchange. And there also, just as an example, it is an offering only for, or mainly for public sector, because public sector requires secure messaging. So that kind of thing. So there is a lot of things that we are working with actually, and the main thing here is also what we try to do is that we try to think, we try to always see that we have a market, we have a client, we have a need, and typically we have a partner as well when we are building those. Just building an offering and then go out and sell, we tried it, it's not that easy. Why is Capgemini in the ODCA? I think it's a kind of a push and pull. We are a service provider. It was discussed also in the first keynote that how can many service providers who actually we do compete when we go outside the room, why are we together? We are actually together because we see that it makes our life easier as well. We know what we are competing with, whom we are competing with. We know the terminology, like in the traditional IT as well. So that's one big thing. And we believe that when we are in the ODCA, we can of course try to tell what we've done to help other people learn from it, and then also we can pull all the usage models from ODCA when we are building our offerings to make it easier for people to understand what we are actually selling. Advise, invest, trust, basically the different kind of prioritization in the participation. So we try to advise in the places where it makes sense, and then of course it guides our investment, and I do believe that it creates some trust as well. Increase the awareness. Then the top challenge is, just briefly, is I think it's still for us, it is the ease or difficulty of migrating into and out of the cloud. Everybody can build a cloud, be it private cloud, whatever it is, but then how do you move your workloads? How do you move your workloads back and forth, for example, if you need to? That is still one of the key topics, and I do believe that the ODCA and the usage models can help there. The cloud mindsets and the confusion, all this has actually been about the cloud mindset and confusion. That we have to be able to solve, and we have to be able to clarify it in a way. And then also for us, and I think for everybody, the resourcing in a way as well. Because there are a lot of things that are common to everything, but exactly for those, what is the business model, how the business model changes, how the provisioning works, all that part. There isn't that many people who really are experts on that part. So those are the things. Okay. This is basically the slide that I will stop. So this again showing what's going to happen in the stream. So the next is the PMV Cloud Insight, then the proof of concept, and then we have two panels. We still have about 5 minutes time, or a few minutes at least. Is there any questions? Any paid questions even? There is somebody from Capgemini as well? No? Well, if that is the case, then thank you. I hope you get something out of it, and try to, really the main thing is that try to keep it simple, use common sense. It's not rocket science, it's only cloud. Okay? Thank you.